Blake, welcome. You and I met at your week in the academy, where you kind of blew me away, actually. And I got to, just before we even start, um, I knew who you were. You obviously knew who you were. Uh,
Maybe.
yeah, mostly, right?
Don't give me that
Um,
credit.
but everyone else didn't need to know who you were. You spent the first 3 or 4 days just very quietly making friends and just being very mellow. And I have a sense that this is kind of part of the way you approach life and work and everything. You've kept it very low key and down home. Is that a correct assumption?
I think I've grown in that. I would definitely say that the early years of my entrepreneurial life, I was probably much more needing to be the center of attention. But I have found that I enjoy interactions with people when we don't have so many labels attached to us, and that beautiful relationships and experiences happen when we're just connecting human to human. And as I told you and Chip that week, those first few days were really special because there's not a lot of chances to be anonymous sometimes. And so I met some amazing people, a couple I see on the chat today. So I'm just really grateful for my time there and excited to keep being part of the community.
Fantastic. Let's rewind. I really want to talk about Madefor for the majority of our time talking together, but it would be remiss to not even touch on your Tom's career.
Sure.
It's interesting, and again, just sort of watching interviews and learning about you, it wasn't this sort of huge strategic play, right? You didn't see a hole in the market for social purpose footwear. How did you arrive at Tom's, and how did you arrive at that mission?
Sure. I mean, I'd say that my entrepreneurial career in general is characterized by me kind of stumbling into new ideas and businesses. I've started 6 companies, and every single company I've started, I had zero experience or even intention of getting in that industry. But something magical happened in my life. This time, a trip to Argentina. And other times, a conversation with a kid that was going through driver's education, or meeting someone that was a country western star wanting to be on a billboard. Every single one of my businesses has really come from just a chance encounter, which I don't believe is by chance. And those have led me to wanting to engage in either a problem that I saw or an opportunity. And I think that's what characterizes a lot of entrepreneurship, is experiencing something that you want to change in the world or make better. And with Tom's, it was very much that. I was actually taking some time off, a mini sabbatical myself, 1 month in Argentina. I was learning to play polo, of all things. I grew up in Texas riding horses and always wanted to take my horse riding to a sport. And I thought that would be a fun place to try it. And I had a kind of a beautiful serendipitous encounter with some women doing volunteer work, and specifically getting children shoes that they needed to go to school. It was a required part of the uniform. That encounter led to them offering me to go and help volunteer that day and distribute shoes to kids and their families who desperately needed them. And that experience impacted me more than I could ever really articulate. But the big kind of aha was I recognized that these children needed shoes not just once, but in a sustainable way, because it was a required part of their uniform. And as great as the hearts and the intentions of the nonprofit that went and got them a bunch of shoes was, they didn't really have a great answer for what was going to happen in 4 months when the kids needed a new pair or outgrew them. And that's what got my entrepreneurial or problem-solving brain kind of enacted. And I was having a coffee the next morning after that amazing day with the kids and full of so much joy. And I was journaling about this kind of issue I saw in the sustainability of this giving program and this charity model. And it just hit me that, like, I'm an entrepreneur. I use business to solve problems. Why not have it be using business to solve a societal problem or something that was typically more characterized as philanthropy or charity, because it could be more sustainable if there was an oncoming or an incoming stream of revenue that would allow more shoes to be purchased and new shoes for these kids, which they really needed. And so I had the idea, literally drinking a coffee on a farm in Argentina, and told my polo teacher, who then became my business partner, about it. And we just kind of got started. I mean, we just didn't really think of it much as a business. We called it the Shoes for Tomorrow project. And that's where the name Tom's comes from, is the word tomorrow, and our idea that we wanted to create a better tomorrow. And we made a couple hundred pairs and thought it'd be fun to go sell them to friends and come back at Christmas and give all the kids in this specific village that we had visited a new pair of shoes. And it started very simply, very quickly, very spontaneously. And I had no idea the incredible journey that I think the powers that be had planned for me.
You didn't come from entrepreneurship, right? You were a professional tennis player, weren't you?
Yeah, my background was 100% an athlete. I played tennis since I was 10 years old at a very competitive level, lived at tennis academies, went to college on tennis scholarship. That was kind of my whole life. But I think that prepared me for kind of especially an individual sport like tennis, really self-reliance, discipline, a lot of those things that I had to do to excel as a kid in tennis. And yeah, I just kind of, had my first idea as a laundry business, which led to other businesses. But very quickly after starting the laundry business, I saw that this was something that I loved, creating something out of nothing, providing a service that people appreciated. And, it's continuing to drive me today.
Reading around and sort of looking up a bit about your past, would you say that like service and doing good and doing well was baked into your sort of family values?
I think definitely my family values, but it was really interesting. I had a mentor when I started my laundry business in college, who was one of the largest benefactors of the university, a guy named Bob Dedman. He was a self-made billionaire, literally grew up in a trailer park, and became one of the wealthiest people in Texas, and gave more money to SMU and I think University of Texas than anyone else at that time. And I got to meet him because he was a huge fan of the tennis team. And he knew that I also loved to play golf beyond just tennis. And he was a big golfer, and he took me to play golf. And I was very much into asking people for advice, as I still am, back then. And I asked him for a piece of advice after we finished our round of golf with all of his success, and as someone who was starting their entrepreneurial career. And I remember he wrote on a piece of paper a very simple saying: the more you give, the more you live. And I put it in my wallet, and I carried it around probably for 6 or 7 years until I lost that wallet, but I never lost what he told me. And so, interestingly enough, I don't know what year it was when MySpace started, but it was probably around 2004 or 5 or something like that. But I remember we had to write a profile about ourselves when we set up a MySpace account. And I remember writing my profile, and I remember writing the last sentence I said, and this is, 5 years before I started Tom's and 5 years before I'd done really anything kind of philanthropic. I said, I'm pretty sure that my life will be measured not by the success that I have, but in how much I give away. And that was really prophetic, because it was in me. But before Tom's, I always assumed I would take the path of almost every entrepreneur before me, and that is use your entrepreneurial gifts, build wealth, and then spend your kind of quote retirement years, which we don't really believe in at MEA, giving the money away. I'd never wanted to die with money in the bank. And so I knew that that's directionally where I was going, but in all honesty, I thought that would be something I would do in my, kind of 70s, 80s, and 90s. And so when I had the idea for Tom's and I saw that it was working, it was amazing kind of full circle moment when I realized, wow, I can actually build a business and be, very philanthropic at the same time.
I think we lost Blake. Did we lose Blake, or did you lose me?
He's frozen. Maybe Wyoming glitch.
It's well known to happen. The sort of idea of giving and giving away, the more you give, the more you live, is a sort of fascinating social enterprise idea, and putting a business as an engine underneath it seems to be like a pretty profound idea. I've been in the sort of social change and social innovation space my entire career. And it actually got to the point where people would say, oh, it's like a Tom's Shoes model. So it's really interesting to think about how it's not just a company with an impact so much as a kind of a cultural phenomenon that had this broader cultural impact as well, where people think.
I think that's one of the most beautiful things now is to see and meet so many entrepreneurs and see so many companies that have really made not just giving, but just a larger social purpose and looking at business with all the stakeholders in mind, from people to the environment. And so that gives me a lot of joy. And I think playing a small part in that has been beautiful.
You sold your company and promptly gave away half of your money.
Yeah.
So this goes deep for you, right? It's not just talk.
Yeah, no one needs that much money. And yeah, I mean, I never really expected to build the type of wealth I did through Tom's. I mean, it was not really ever even a consideration until we saw this massive momentum that we had. And I just want a big part of my experience with Tom's to be to inspire other people to take risk when they're creating a social enterprise. And so the fund that I created is funded, I think, 35 or 40 businesses now already, and more coming down the pipe that are all have one shared value, and that is using their business to improve people's lives.
That is amazing. Thank you. That's really awesome. Before we move off from Tom's, there's a bunch of people on this call who are in transition. They're sort of thinking about their next steps. They're thinking about their careers. They're thinking about starting a business. And it can be a little bit kind of like, holy shit, $500 million company. That's not how you started, right? Can you just give us a sense of that airstream where you started? Because I think that it's almost impossible to believe that you got from there to here.
Yeah, I mean, look, I pinch myself every day and kind of feel it hard to believe as well. But yeah, I mean, the Tom's was seeded with $3,500 of my money. And because we sold online, we would get cash flow before we had to pay our factories. And so we were able to grow to a certain point. And then we had enough momentum that we could get a loan from the bank once we got bigger. And then we just kept getting more and more loans to grow. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I didn't really even know it was going to be a business when I started. I mean, I didn't write a business plan. I didn't have like even a business account. It was all out of my personal account for a long time. And we just got on the road and told the story. I mean, that's something that I've written about and spoken a lot about. And I think one of the most powerful things in any new venture is the story and the authenticity of the story. And it stands out far more than any marketing ever can. And so we had these beautiful kids that we were serving, and we wanted to take their stories and the impact that people's purchases were having on them on the road. And so I actually convinced the CEO of Airstream, after cold calling him, to give me an Airstream for 6 months. And then he called his friend, who was the president of Ford, to give us a Ford truck to pull the Airstream. And my intern, Zach, and I went on the road for about 90 days, coast to coast. And we would just set up in parking lots. And I mean, it's almost like a religious revival. We would get up and show the video and tell the story and sell the shoes. And that's really how it started. And I think that's why we had retailers that were so passionate about telling our story, because they heard it firsthand from us. And I still believe that that's one of the most powerful things a business can have, is a really strong, authentic, purposeful origin story that can easily be repeated and shared among its kind of loyal customers and fans. And so that really is how we were able to grow, and frankly, how the financial model made sense, because we were giving so much money away that we didn't really have money for traditional marketing. And all the marketing and growth really came from, word of mouth. And a lot of that came from originally us telling our story to people.
On a micro scale, that's very resonant with what we're trying to do at the Academy, right? So spend marketing dollars. Instead of spending marketing dollars, we give a ton of scholarships and build that same momentum. But it's not a Tom's Shoes model. Okay, so you sell your company. Everything is awesome, right? You're married, you're doing awesome, you've got more money than you know what the hell to do with. And what happens then?
I almost feel like at this point in the story, it's now that I've met so many other people and shared my story and realized that it's really not, fortunately and unfortunately, that unique. And that is, I kind of had my first real encounter with some hard times from a mental health perspective, which sounds crazy when you kind of get everything you ever desired, but it's what happened is I woke up and I didn't really have any driving purpose in my life. I didn't have a consistent, kind of job and colleagues to have community with. I was very alienated from all my friends because they were working their butts off still, and had all the normal stresses that everyone normally has. And I kind of thought my best days were behind me. And that's a really frightening thought. Unfortunately, as I've learned more about mental health and specifically, one of the gravest issues, suicide, a lot of the reasons that people get to that state is they believe their best days are behind them. I thankfully never got to such a severe experience, but I did, kind of battle mild depression off and on for about 2 years. And it challenged a lot of my relationships and my just relationship with myself. And so, thankfully, I think going back to tennis, actually, I've always been someone who is a self-starter and doesn't allow them to kind of let a defeat or a hard time hold them down for long. And so that kind of personal experience I had and not wanting to go down some traditional paths of dealing with this mental health issue, I decided to proactively seek out people who were living the opposite, who were really thriving and flourishing and had grounding practices that kept them, feeling in their highest state of well-being, regardless of the turbulence of times. And I was lucky enough to meet my now business partner, Pat Dossett, who was a Navy SEAL for 9 years and then post his time in the teams. Yeah.
Just quickly before we move on, because again, I've heard this story. I need to sort of understand the man before we move on.
Sure.
You're in a mild depression, when all of that constitutes. You're a surfer, right? You're a multiple athlete. You enjoy surf, you enjoy tennis, you enjoy golf, all of these things. Was there nothing that was supporting you in that time? Was there nothing that you were able to do to kind of find release? Because I think for many of us right now, that sense of like, fuck, I'm stuck and I don't know what I'm going to do for the next stage of my life is really prevalent.
Yeah, I think I'm glad you brought that up because I did it all. I became a very proficient mountaineer during that time. I started racing cars. I started doing pretty much anything I could do to get my mind off what I was kind of feeling. But ultimately what I found was those were all external accomplishments and I would say distractions from what really needed to be worked on. And that was my inner work. And so, like I took all the, traditional kind of means to get a release. And those things are great in moderation for sure. But, when you're trying to find or fill something that is, kind of void internally with external things, becoming a great mountaineer and, climbing these summits was no different than building and selling toms. It was all this external accomplishments that I was looking to fulfill me. And I think in some ways it's a great privilege to have had gone through that because as many amazing spiritual teachers I've met with since then have said is like the beginning of, kind of the rest of your life starts when you come to the conclusion that all these external things will never, create the lasting joy that you're seeking. And so, I tried a lot of things during that time. Some, kind of very, I'd say healthy and some not so healthy. And ultimately did lead to, this is something internally I need to, kind of is really an inner journey more than an external one.
So you meet your partner. That's where I interrupted you. Keep going.
No problem. I mean, I met Pat and, he was this amazing man who had been in incredible service to our country and the SEALs, and part of what the SEALs are exposed to is a lot of science and human optimization. And so he was very interested in kind of that aspect of the human experience. but he also is a very tender, sensitive man. And he had done some real inner work, and had really been able to ground himself in some very simple practices, some that we'll maybe talk about today, and definitely some that Madefor are founded on. And so he looked at my situation and said, like, I would love not just to help you, but to really help think about this as a systemic issue in our country, because we have more people on antidepressants than ever in history. We have more people taking sleep aids just to get a good night's sleep. There's been, and this is all pre-COVID, of course. This is 2.5 years ago. And so, but he really was interested in taking a scientific approach. He was very interested in working with neuroscientists and behavioral scientists to understand, are there simple things that are available to all of us as humans that can really insulate us from the challenges of modern living and the challenges of burnout and what I was feeling. And so we decided to, once again, this wasn't a business. It was beautiful. We said, let's take a year and I'll fund a research project. And basically, Pat will go meet with the top scientists at universities around the country. And he's going to ask this question, like, what have you actually scientifically been able to prove in your lab makes a difference in someone's well-being? And the first scientist he met was Andrew Huberman, who has a lab at Stanford in the neuroscience department. And Andrew was just like all on this. I mean, this was right up what his life's work has been about. And Andrew signed on with us and really kind of, became our third partner, in a way, and then started introducing us to other scientists around the country studying different behaviors and habits that can affect people's lives. And so that year, really fun project.
Is that the Wyoming glitches again?
Seems to be.
Okay. I think I'll see if I can do another soft shoe routine and just space fill. I can do jazz hands and stuff like that. He jumped on pretty quickly the last time, so let's give him a chance to do so again.
I'll send a little jazz hand energy to Wyoming.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you brought up an interesting point, if I might.
Yeah.
We talked about how we don't believe in retirement at MEA. And I think that one of the points that you brought to us early on was that there was a trap inherent in retiring and then feeling a sense of obligation to be in service. Yeah. And I think that you brought some really interesting thinking to us about the freeing ourselves from that thought process. Do you want to talk about that for a minute?
And I'm back. I'm sorry. I don't know why I get kicked out again. Maybe there's just too many people on.
Christine was actually pointing at a really interesting question, Blake, which is this sense of like, God, there's a responsibility. I've made all this money, or I've done well, or I've done my thing, and I'm therefore responsible to do something meaningful or worthwhile with my life. Did you go through that as well, or was it just like this dip just took you on this personal exploration that led to the next company?
Yeah, no, I didn't feel that. I mean, I feel maybe because, I spent 12 years building Tom's and was very proud of what we had done. I didn't feel like I had an obligation or responsibility. I think that's kind of inherent in how I just operated in general, even before Tom's, that those who've been given great resources have great responsibilities. But I think the bigger thing is I was really went down this journey for myself, honestly. And then I saw like really incredible results in how I was able to kind of take back control of my own well-being and how I thought about things and relationships, and deal with hard things. Like I had just much more insulation, I think, from the trials and tribulations of life. And then it just was so obvious with Pat, because he's such a man of service himself, that it was like, we now have like this amazing knowledge. And specifically what we learned was, really important is we didn't just learn like some hacks or some habits that help. We actually learned two very important things from a neuroscience standpoint that really kind of creates the whole program. And that is, number one is it's really, really hard to learn, and then most importantly, sustain a new habit when you're trying to learn more than one thing at a time. And so there's a lot of work around deep learning and how we've moved away from that as a society. But what we saw from a neuroplasticity standpoint was, in order to really learn something and have it stick, you not only need to focus on it for 30 days, like we've all heard, but you really need to do it in a totally focused and disrupted way. And so one of the big tenets of Madefor is that it's a 10-month program, and each month we only focus on one basic thing. And some people will think when they get it, like, this is too basic, but it's so surprising how, if you really stick to something basic, how transformative it can be. And then the second thing, and it's kind of ironic that we're doing this on Zoom, but it is what it is. But I think MEA very much believes this as well, is Madefor is completely analog. So the whole experience happens outside of your digital devices. There's no apps on Madefor. There's no check-ins. There's no gamification. It's all about these kits that we send you each month, that you interact with these tools that our scientists have designed to help you learn this new habit. And it's completely analog in an internal experience. Now, you might do it with your friends or your colleagues. We have a lot of companies now doing it, even during COVID, as a way to keep their teams connected and growing together. But that was the other thing we learned, is that we're so digitally distracted that it's also and we're getting so much information at once that very little real change happens when people have the inclination. And so the whole program is analog, and it's one thing at a month, one thing per month. And so that was one of the big findings that we found, that we felt was really important to teach people and bring to people.
A couple of questions stacked up, but I lost you at a fork in the road. You talk a lot about science, right?
Yeah.
So there's that moment, you're there, you're trying to work out how to dig out of your own hole, and you turn to science. It's an interesting choice, and I'm interested in why you made that choice, in as much as a lot of people perhaps go more mystical or spiritual or whatever route. What was it about the science that attracted you, and what was it about the science that makes the foundation of Madefor strong for you?
Yeah, I mean, that was really my business partner, Pat. I mean, coming from the military, he is very much a no bullshit guy. And when I was telling him some of the things, like I said, some healthy, not so healthy, that I was trying to do to get to feel better, he just kind of rolled his eyes a little bit and said, like, I think there's some basics that you could, master first. And so he was really the one. And he also had insights into some of these scientists and labs through his work and his life experience, where he knew that there was some real ground to stand on here. And I think that's also one of the things that really differentiates the whole program, is that there's a lot of times where it'd be much easier, and definitely from a marketing standpoint, much easier to get people to engage in this program, because it's not easy to stick to something for 10 months and not do it digitally and do the work that it takes for real change. But the thing that we can stand on is that there've been studies. There's nothing in Madefor that we can't point back to a university and a strong study that shows this actually works. Even something as simple as hydration, which is one of our months. I mean, people sometimes roll their eyes like, oh, I know I need to drink water. But there's a lot of science between hydration and, a lot of ways that we become dehydrated that we don't even know about. And when you really get your hydration levels at an optimal level, everything in your body performs better, and especially your mental state. A lot of energy levels and a lot of moods are actually affected by these minuscule rates of dehydration that we're not even aware of. And so we take very simple things, that's one of them, and we really help educate people and make it fun for people to really understand kind of the details of these practices.
So it's analog, keep it analog. You give people physical artifacts as well, right? To help.
Sure. Yeah. Basically a kit is, so each kit is a book that you can read in 25 minutes or less. So it's all the science condensed into a very simple, kind of fun to read, almost the length of like a long New Yorker article. And then the second thing is a tool, or sometimes 2 or 3 tools that we have designed alongside our scientists to help you learn and engage in a fun way in this new practice. It has to be fun, we've realized. So we give these tools so that you can enjoy the experience of learning something new. And then the third thing is the monthly challenge. And I will say there is one digital component that came after we did a beta test of 1,300 people for a year. The one feedback was they wanted more community for accountability. So we do have every group, which is usually between 500 and 1,000 people per month they all start together. There's a private Facebook.
Okay, we have the Wyoming factor again. So my understanding is that 6,000 people have been through Madefor right now, which is kind of pretty astonishing since they only launched in, I believe it was March. So they're getting an incredible uptick of people that are trying this out and trying the tools out. And I know that towards the end of this session, Blake is going to find a way for us to get in with a special code and so on and so forth. So if you're interested, it sounds like a fascinating program. And I personally love the way that it sort of stacks around observable science and practices that you can see work. Do we have Blake back yet?
Yes, you do. I don't know. This is my first Zoom call I've ever had in the whole pandemic that I've been bounced off. I mean, normally my Wi-Fi is amazing. So
there we go. No worries. It's all good. We just basically recapped the program. So Blake, let's spend five or 6 minutes. There are things that are going to take us a month to learn, and practices are going to take us a month to learn, and that we should focus on. But the one that you wanted to shine a light on in this session was our morning routine,
Sure.
And how people build a morning routine. So I will hand it over to you.
Yeah, so morning routine is actually not specifically one of the months of Madefor, but it's something that I think is a compilation of some of the practices that I've learned and adopted into my life. But it really comes back to this really fundamental concept of Madefor, and that is small actions over time make big results in people's lives, and the importance of momentum. And I specifically want to talk about this one because of the state that we're in this pandemic. Having forward positive momentum in your day when you're faced with homeschooling your kids and trying to keep your job and trying to stay inspired and all the challenges that everyone is facing is probably more important than ever. And so I have found over all the things that I've done, developing a strong morning routine has been one of the ways that I have created more better days than bad days for me. And so I don't think there's any magical morning routine. I think what's important is that you can be consistent and that it helps you enter the day in a peaceful state. Now, there are some aspects of my morning routine that once again lead to Madefor, and specifically, there's a whole month in Madefor will really help you optimize sleep. Getting a good night's sleep is really one of the foundations of both mental and physical health. And there's a lot of little mistakes that people make every day as they prepare to go to bed and even how they wake up that, if changed, can have a dramatic effect on their lives. One of them is one of the biggest, I would say, challenges of sleep is using your phone as your alarm clock. And a lot of people do that. Most people do that now. And the problem with that is, even if you say you're not checking emails or text or social, oftentimes the temptation is too strong, and that happens before you go to bed. So then you're emitting all this blue light into your eyes. It messes with your circadian rhythm. It has you have trouble falling asleep or affects your dream states. And then worse, though, even than that, is when you wake up to your alarm clock as your phone. Oftentimes you immediately get distracted by a text message or a notification or something, which then causes your cortisol levels to spike. And before you've even gotten out of bed, your morning routine or calmness or presence is just blown out of the water. So my morning routine, one of them is using an alarm clock instead of my phone. And that has been a huge part of being able to enter my day without any real negative distractions. Now, I will say I'm a dad of 2 kids, and it's oftentimes that they become my alarm clock, which definitely messes with my morning routine, but it's gotten me just more motivated to wake up that extra 15 minutes earlier. For me, my morning routine, and then I'll hand it over for questions and we can discuss all different types of morning routines, really centers on a contemplative practice. And so I have tea every morning, and I do it in a very purposeful way. And I have 3 cups of it. And I really try to have that be a time where there's just no inputs or outputs happening, but just stillness. And having that stillness, which usually takes 15 minutes, then allows me to proceed in my day, I think, in a calmer state. And it feels like I've accomplished something. I've carved out a little time for myself. So no matter how much time I need to give to the kids or my colleagues or whatever philanthropic projects I'm working on, I feel like I've claimed a little piece for myself. And so morning tea, and then if I have the time, I love to journal for 5 or 10 minutes. And that's just free form writing, reflections on the day before, what I hope to accomplish today, things that I'm grateful for. But that's a routine that I can stick to because it doesn't take a ton of time. It's something I enjoy because I love the caffeine of the tea. And that's also important in your morning routine. It should be enjoyable and something you look forward to, not a chore. But the most important thing is that it can be consistent.
Does it ever work against you? In other words, because I also have 2 young kids and I also have a morning routine, and sometimes they just tear up my morning routines really, really fast. Does it work against you if you can't do that practice?
It's Jeff, that's like the best question you could have asked, because there have been times, where I feel like almost like that something's off when I don't get it. Oftentimes I'll try to come back to it after the kids are at school or I have a little time before a meeting. But I don't think that's a reason not to do it. So I think that, there are those days where I think it might, if you get used to, it's kind of like if you eat really healthy and then you eat really shitty for a day and you feel bad, then it's like, well, should I never eat healthy? Because then, it's like if my body gets used to great food and then I eat bad food, well, I know what's going to happen. So I don't think that's a reason not to do it. But I also think that, you have to have a certain amount of grace and self-compassion with yourself when you don't get to it. And then just, try to get back on track. And it's especially hard, like you said, with kids.
So the elements of a morning routine that I'm picking up are sort of creating space for quiet contemplation with no inputs, self-reflection, and elements of self-care, right? The tea, the whatever, and kind of really understanding it as a moment for yourself. Any other kind of core elements you'd encourage people to explore?
Sure. I mean, for me, I'm very active. I live in places that are very active where I either get to surf or mountain bike or stuff. So movement always happens in my day. I'm very blessed. But for people who that is not a given, then doing, 5 or 10 minutes of some basic yoga poses, movements, breathing, like that stuff is really important as well. It's just not part of my routine because I get it at a different time in the day. But I would say if you don't get movement during your day, I would definitely add 5 minutes of movement. And what's amazing is movement, we found, because we studied this a lot in Madefor, of all ages and all athletic or non-athletic abilities, in 5 or 10 minutes, you can get your heart rate up, you can get your body moving, you can get your, kind of some the joints kind of moving again. And it doesn't have to be incredibly strenuous, or it can be really strenuous if you're very active. And if someone does something really hard, even just for a few minutes, they can kind of jumpstart their body. So I think movement is a really, really important one. I think breath is another important one. Once again, that's something that, oftentimes between meetings, I'll get a 10-minute meditation or something in. So it's not something I feel like I have to do first thing in the morning, but it does kind of naturally come into the tea practice because it's very quiet and contemplative. But I would say breath and movement are also cornerstones for some of the best and most effective morning routines that I've heard about or know friends that do.
Beautiful. We've got about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to just sort of open this up a little bit to everyone online. One question I know that a couple of people are really interested in is Madefor operating outside of the US, or is it just domestic US at the moment?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's just US. We're trying to open up Canada and Australia next. That seems to be the two countries we've gotten the most requests for. And we're really a startup. We started March 4th, like right before Corona hit. And, so we've been going through a lot of the challenges of expanding and meeting demand. But yeah, unfortunately, it's only in the US right now.
Do you think Corona has helped you?
In a weird way, it's been this like really interesting effect. So we had because of, Tom's, I guess, notoriety, we had a tremendous amount of press and media set up for March, April, May, good morning shows and big features and all this stuff. And of course, all that shut down. And so the first couple months, we had far less kind of people sign up than we thought, only about, I don't know, maybe 300 people a month. And then what happened was, once again, it goes back to the word of mouth, the people who were experiencing the grounding practices and kind of positive momentum in their lives doing Madefor during being shelter in place started telling their friends. And so we've now seen growth far greater. The last 2 months, we've had over 1,100 people in each class, which is a number that we didn't anticipate even for the first year. And so I think it's helping us now for sure, because I think the need is greater than ever now. And, many people are still, really sheltering. And so having something that comes to your home that's personalized for you, that's very simple and easy to follow, has, I think, created a lot of amazing testimonials. I was actually doing, right before I got here, they just sent me a video that I'm going to post tomorrow on my social because I was so touched by it. But it was a Zoom testimonials of a ton of members that got on Zoom and just kind of openly shared what has happened to them. And one of the guys in our office made a little, very simple, no fancy video, but just a really simple video of what people have experienced. And yeah, I was tearing up when I watched it, and I was like, I want to share this tomorrow.
So you have all of this anecdotal and emotional kind of energy behind what you're doing. Given that what you're doing is science-based, have you built in metrics? Have you built in sort of ways of tracking people's change?
Yeah, so what we do is at the end of each month, the only time that we ever contact you digitally is we send you a text message if you've opted in, but it's like 88% of the people have opted in. And just very simple, in like 30 seconds, you can kind of say how hard the challenge was, how meaningful, did it create a sustained change? And so we're getting that data now through the thousands of people that are doing it. And then once, kind of we get out of this in probably first year and kind of see what the world looks like next year, we want to partner with one of the universities that we've worked with in the past to do more of a, kind of a more scientific study of, a group of people that are going through the program versus a group of people that aren't, that have similar lifestyle stresses, kind of economic situations, et cetera. So it's right now, it's really just through a bunch of surveys, but we get great participation in those. And we also did a beta group, it's worth saying. So rather than just launching this, we spent a whole year just serving 1,300 members, or 10 months. And so we made a lot of little tweaks and changes to the program during that beta, which now has all been implemented in our members' experience.
Okay, so let's get down to brass tacks. We have people are pinging me like crazy saying, okay, so how much does this thing cost? How do I get to it? What do I do? What's the deal? What's the deal, Blake?
The deal is between $75 and $60 a month, depending on if you pay up front or you pay monthly. So we offer both options. And I believe we were going to do a special 20% off discount for all the modern elder, kind of family. And so I don't know what that is. If you don't, I can text someone and they can tell me, Jeff, but do you guys have that?
We,
I don't have an offer code, if that's what
here. I'll get it right now.
We can also share it with the community as well, but I know that there are people outside of the Modern Elder Academy group here. So
great. Yeah, I'm just going to get, let's see, it might be great. Okay, I texted him. I'll show you right back to me.
That's 75, between 65 and 75. You also do scholarships, right?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we have a program called Made for Everyone. And so as I thought about kind of how do we offer this to as many people as possible, we thought about kind of a 1-for-1 program, in light of Tom's. And what we ultimately decided is that, we really want to extend the program to anyone who is really wanting to create this positive change in their life, and for many reasons can't afford it, especially during the pandemic. So on the site, there's an area called Made for Everyone. It requires that you write a kind of a contemplative essay on, why you believe this could really help you in your life and how you will be able to pay it forward to others. And we have a ton of people on scholarship, and it's a big part of the culture. And I'd say, in terms of team building, we have, a small team at Made For, but we, do these weekly team meetings and stuff. And I would say some of the most motivational and kind of energizing times that we have each week is when we get, notes from scholarship members sharing what they're learning and how grateful they are. And it makes us, want to continue to build that into the program.
In 5 years' time, if Made For's done exactly what you wanted to, what does the world look like? What's different?
I mean, I really think, like, Pat always gets frustrated if I make big claims. So I'm going to be very careful not to make any big claims right now. But this stuff works. I mean, it's just like, it's that simple. Like, it really, really works if you do the work. And so in 5 years' time, my hope is that this is a program, like Modern Elder, like other programs that some of us have attended or experienced, that people really feel is a foundational part of the way that they're living. And it has such an impact on their lives that they can't help but share it with their loved ones, their kids, their parents, their spouses, their colleagues. And I hope that at some point that our healthcare system will recognize how beneficial this is for our physical and mental health, and that Made For will be a program that would be even covered by health insurance. I mean, that's kind of, to me, is somewhere I think directionally we need to go, because the interventions and the cost that we have, historically gone down largely with pharmaceuticals and other ways, I don't think are as effective. And that's a much larger conversation. And there are definitely times when you need, medical intervention. But I think what I think Made For does is it raises the foundational level of lots of little things, so that you preemptively take kind of control of your well-being before you get to a state of really needing a big intervention. And so I think it's really kind of up-leveling all these little things that are foundational that, really can have transformative effects. And one of the things I'll say, you just made me think of this, is the coolest things that have happened with Made For members to me are the changes that have happened that have nothing to do with our program, or we don't think do. So like, big lifestyle changes, big goals that they've been wanting to reach for a long time. They're saying, I did this because I Made For it. And I'm like, well, that's not even one of the months, and they're like, yeah, but I changed my mindset. I had a very fixed mindset. I know this is something we talked about at MEA when I was there, to the importance of a growth mindset and the work of Carol Dweck. And so I think that's a big part of what we're doing from a neuroscience standpoint, is we're giving people these small wins because we make it really easy to accomplish the monthly goals. But then they see that that's affecting all different parts of their life that are helping them live in a higher state of well-being. And so it's those successes that I think, drive us to, kind of stay the course and really get the program in as many people as we can.
There's a theme for this call from the very beginning to now, Blake. It's this idea that you empower people to do these little things, right? So I buy a pair of shoes, but I'm also able to give back. I focus on a single behavior, but it kind of impacts my life in a much broader way. It's interesting to see how that's woven into everything you've done.
No, well, I think the thing is I appreciate you saying that. And I think, for me, it goes back to that quote that Bob Dedman gave me when I was 20 years old. The more you give, the more you live. I think anyone who's ever had the opportunity to enrich someone's lives through a teaching, through an experience, through an act of service, knows that there's just something in the way that we were designed as humans that causes us chemically, really, to have amazing days on the days that we're helping others. And, we can all do that in little ways. And for me, I've been given some entrepreneurial gifts. And when I'm able to use those to, help others, kind of experience a more joyful or purposeful or meaningful or life, then that's kind of what gets my juices going for sure.
So we end our interview on your juices.
Okay, hold on. I think they texted me back. Let's see. Here, they said just to use my friends code. So it's 20% off, and it's Madefor, and then my initials, BM, Blake Mycoskie. So Madefor BM Friends. So Madefor BM Friends will be 20% off the program for the next couple of days.
Thank you so much. And thanks to you all for joining us, everybody.
This is awesome. And I look forward to this pandemic being over for many, many reasons, as everyone does, but especially to get back to Baja. As I've told all you guys, that experience, last winter and as we were preparing to launch Madefor and thinking about, my next ability to have impact in the world was so important for me. And I look forward to coming back as a teacher and just being part of the community. So this has been great.
Fantastic. We look forward to seeing you again, Blake.
Thank you, guys.
Take care.